I think we'll just give it another minute for people to arrive. So for those who've just joined us, if you could go onto the collaborative notes and just sort of fill in your participants' details, that'd be brilliant. It's on page 2. And I think we'll get underway shortly. Angus, how are we doing for numbers at the moment?
We're up to 38.
Okay. Is it settling off now? Right, so whilst everybody's frantically adding their details into the collaborative notes, I think we'll make a start if that's okay. So welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining our our interest group professionalizing data stewardship session today. We'll be covering business cases, terminology, organizational models, and training for professionalizing data stewardship, task group outputs, and looking at the future of the interest group as it moves towards its next phases. So just a few little notes of housekeeping. So first of all, those of you, as you've joined, you'll notice that we are recording the session and we'll be sharing the meeting afterwards, those who can't make it today. Whilst we are sort of going through things, if you can remain on mute, that'd be fantastic. And later on, there'll be a chance for us to have a discussion session when you're welcome to unmute then and participate using, raise your hands and things like that to let us know you'd like to speak. There will be discussion in the chat. Please add your thoughts and information to the collaborative notes as we go along. And there will be a chance to add your questions and answers in the Q&A channel as well, I think. Later on, when we come to the discussion slot, Christina has some group map links for us to use in your own web browser. Please use those and add information on there to feed into that discussion, which Christina will lead us through. So the agenda for today, we're going to go through a quick introduction to cover who the co-chairs are and also some of the history of the interest group for those who are new to it. And we'll be looking at the proposed roadmap for the next phase of the interest group. Then we'll move on to some task group presentations, which will be between 5 and 10 minutes each. And following that, we'll have a sort of discussion period. And then we'll close with a retrospective from our tab liaison, Christine Kirkpatrick. And then we'll wrap up. So to keep in touch with us as well, you'll find those details inside the collaborative notes to go through to our web pages, links to our Slack community, and also contact details to keep in touch as well. So let's get going. So we've had a small change in the co-chairs over the past year. Unfortunately, we've said goodbye to Varsha, and I've stepped in a couple of months ago as well. I ended up landing myself chairing today as well, which is always a good thing to do. So thanks very much to all of the co-chairs for their inputs leading into today, and also the task group leads as well. So quick sort of place where we are today is the Professionalising Data Stewardship sort of formulated around addressing some particular problems that we were encountering. So we all recognize that data stewardship and data management skills are essential in the research process, but it's the lack of the consensus of the responsibilities, knowledge, skills, and value of data stewardship, which can lead to confusion about our roles, and it can therefore hamper building adequate data stewards capacity. That combined with scarce resources for data stewardship can often sort of be a limiting factor on developing data stewardship and ensuring that career paths are available as well. So back in RDA Plenary 14, there was a Birds of a Feather session, and that's what brought together a lot of people to really sort of explore this topic. And from that, the following sort of RDA sessions 15, 16, we saw a PDS interest group being formulated. Task groups were also produced from that. And we've been sort of mapping the interdependencies and prioritizing the work of those groups as well. Session 17, we had sort of initial feedback and some working sessions and breakouts for task groups 1, 2, and 3. So that's the business cases, the terminology, and the models. And today we'll be hearing some updates from those 3 task groups, and also task group 5, the training. I also mentioned that we're going to talk about the roadmap for the next phase of the interest group. So this is something which has been discussed with the co-chairs for a few months now, sort of building on the work of the task groups 1 to 3 in particular. And the aim is to try and bring together those strands and outputs over the next couple of months, so that in sort of around about mid-January, February time, we'll sort of arrange a webinar to bring together everybody in the interest group and the wider community to present those outputs of those task groups and to give us a real idea of where our understanding is of the landscape. And from that, we'll have a wider, fuller discussion about all aspects of professionalizing data stewardship. And we hope then to formulate a direction for the next phase of the interest group. And if appropriate, we can then look at formulating a formal working group within RDA to help set some targets for us as an interest group. And there may also be continuation or the starting up of various task group activities as well. So we'll now lead on to our 4 presentations. So I'm going to hand over to Deborah for the business case task group.
Thank you, Graham. It's great to be here today with you. Do you hear me all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just a brief update on the business case task group. For those of you that are newcomers, we have been working on this challenge on the challenge that organizations face regarding data stewardship, and the need to express the benefit of having data stewards, people that are skilled on data stewardship at the organizations. So we have been collecting some case studies to highlight the benefits of data stewardship for the different organizations, and also what can go wrong if you don't have that expertise. And the output that we have been working on is a report. So this is the report structure right now. So I believe some of you have been with us the last plenary. We work on that in a mirror board, in a breakout session. So we are dividing the report on this introduction part where we state what a data steward is and the whole of a data steward, and what does the data steward do, And also we have a nice table on the stakeholders and what is the whole of the data steward and the benefits for different stakeholders. And the last session we had this workshop on the breakout where we covered from the community some aspects of the what are the benefits and different use cases. So next slide, please, Graham. So the idea today is to mature a little more on the what should be the scope of this report and gather more information from the community. So we're having this nice discussion part of the session today where after all the task groups presenting, we're going to discuss how we can connect the different work that is being conducted in the interest group. So we also aim on having more case studies for the report and how to align the deliverables. As Graham mentioned in the beginning, we aim to have develop a little more and mature more for in the beginning of the next year. So it will be great to hear from you, your thoughts, and I'll be glad to clarify anything about this task group work. And so I will finish here and hand over to Romain, and we meet later in the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. So Romain.
Hi, everybody. So I will give you a short update on terminology task. Just a reminder, the challenge of this task is combining terminologies in data stewardship to bring different organizations together. So in RDA, but out of RDA too, and highlighting polysemic issues on various use of terms across domains. So this task will never be finished because it's a big work with lots of various competencies. But we want to present a methodology and to test it in different groups. So the steps are to reuse existing works from RDA for the first one, and other fora, and enrich existing tools if it's possible. Promote interaction with other task group and working group in RDA to find and propose the definitions they need, and formalizing a community approval process to choose the better definitions and vocabularies. Data steward terminology is expected and a tool to share and validate terms. And a first version of a minimal set of common terms definitions will be shared in RDA. So the inputs that are waiting from the RDA community are feedback and suggestions. Are we taking the correct approach? And is there any work or vocabularies that we should consider behind this work? Next slide, please. So the methodology proposal is always not reinvent the wheel, and using existing working group and interest group outputs. In many recommendations and use case, we have vocabulary sections. So we will compile them, and we want to select first set of terms of definition from this kind of recommendations. For instance, from the SHARC interest group, Sharper templates, the Fair Data Maturity Model working group recommendations, the COVID-19 working group recommendation, etc. So we want to determine missing definitions from experts in RDA interest group and working group. So initially, a target selection of interest group is chosen to provide core list of terms and test the methodology. And the core list of their terms is regarding and is according their activity and topics. For instance, for Shark, it will be terminology around rewarding and crediting when sharing data. So the work is in progress in 2 groups, with sensitive data interest group and Shark interest group, but I'm open to other proposals. I will also propose to other groups like data granularity interest group, data quality interest group, etc. And the selection of terms will be based on following steps. So it's an iterative process, as I said. We will ask to all the experts of one group to list main and secondary terms for each expert, something like 10 or 20 terms. So it's not a lot, but when you have all the number of the groups that participate, you can have more than 100 terms for one group. And after we ask to each expert to prioritize them in 3 levels. What are the terms that are essentials? What are the terms that are important and that could be useful in their topics? And we try to find a valid definition in a paper. In a peer-reviewed paper, it's better. And if not existing, we create a precise existing definition if necessary and add the source. And the last step will be to vote by the group members if there is one or several alternatives for the term. At this step, so for instance, for the example, in the Shark group, we have listed 150 terms. There are some that are primary term because it's only one word or one concept. And after, when you associate with other words, you can precise it. For instance, here you have assessment, and you have in secondary term assessment for credit, assessment for rewards, data sharing assessment, job assessment, open science assessment, etc. And after, we create categories 3 to 6, and we put level of importance: essential, important, and useful. And it's an ongoing work. So if you are active in another group that is interested to try this methodology, you are welcome. I think it's finished for me. So I give the floor to Graham.
Okay, thanks, Roman. So I'll sort of go over the task group 3, which is the data stewardship models, the work we've been doing over the past year. So the challenges that we were sort of set was that there are ill-defined models for data stewardship service provision, which can lead to duplication of efforts and the implementation of inappropriate strategies. And to sort of address that challenge, we were looking at the step of an environmental scan of data stewardship and governance staffing models to develop a representative collection of real-world usable models. And that's kind of like where we are at the moment with our group. So around all the conversations that we've had over the past couple of years, we sort of dropped onto this sort of conceptual diagram to sort of help us to think about things. So we aim to sort of model the data stewardship roles within particular service provisions of data stewardship and the larger organizational contexts within which such provisions exist, and how those roles and services interact with their target communities. So going from that conceptual diagram, we then started doing a bit of an example landscape scan, just from what the cases that we were aware of within the task group. And we sort of came up with sort of 2 axes to kind of look at them. The first one is the organizational level of which a service might exist. And the second one is the degree of specificity for the domains which they cover as well. And it was really just kind of like, we looked around, saw particular examples, and we sort of see, okay, can we sort of group those together and see how they fit on such a plot? And from that, we can then sort of say, okay, well, we expect to see there'll be some small scale bespoke services where data stewardship has a chance to be closely involved with the work that's going on. But there could be the potential for, say, like a Wild West sort of situation. Moving on, you'll have sort of institutional-wide generic services, which might have a very broad role for data stewardship, which could be overstretched, and there'll be sort of varying levels of interaction. Then you move up to, say, the national sort of domain repositories, which could again be potentially well-resourced, but could have quite a narrow focus. While pan-national data projects could also exist as well, which could be quite technically heavy solutions to very particular domains or subdomains, and so therefore have a narrow scope. And sort of contrasting that, you may have sort of pan-national generic services such as Figshare and Zenodo, where there could be a lighter touch technically for the end user, but the stewardship is very much left to the providers. So that's kind of like the basis on which we then worked over the past year, especially to bring together the survey. And I'm hoping that Bill's now dropping the link.
Graham, let me just. There we go. So yeah, there's the live survey link in the chat for everyone, and it's in the notes too. If I can just quickly mention one thing, that so the survey is live and working. We have had one report of a problem accessing it from Apple Safari, but I think generally it's working okay. There's a fault ticket open. If anyone who accesses it does have that problem, then maybe try another browser or clear the cache. It is a single report at the moment, so I think the survey is working fine. But just to make people aware that if Safari doesn't work, please try another browser.
Thank you very much, Bill. So yeah, that survey is currently running up until the 25th of November. There we go, it's on the slide. And yeah, so we'd like you to sort of go in there, fill it in, and share the link around as much as possible as well. And once that's closed, our next steps are to sort of identify groupings of similar services and look for commonalities and differences in the responses. And hopefully from that, we can establish some models of practice that exist as well. And the aim is to eventually release an analysis report and an anonymized data set via Zenodo under the Creative Commons by and share alike license. So just to give you a quick overview of the survey structure. So the first sort of section is the basic information about the service or data stewardship provision. Then we have another section which looks at the roles and the functions within that service, before we then go on to sort of capture the wider context. But in addition to that, we're looking at other aspects as well about the maturity of the service, the level of engagement that they have with the community, the experiences which they have as well, whether they're good or bad, and the overall impact of the service. So at the moment, we are aiming for hopeful target sample size of around about 300. And Bill's about to give us some live scores on the doors.
Yeah, so as of about 5 minutes ago, it's gone up a little bit. We've got a handful more, 41 completed responses and 107 in progress. So anyone in the room who may be in progress, we encourage you to finish it so that we can add it to the full data set in good time.
Thank you very much, Bill. So I've grabbed some initial bits of information out of the surveys we've gotten so far, just to get an idea of how the spread is for the different responses so far. And we can see we get a very large sort of clustering around the institutional level, and then we get quite a sort of smattering of other responses at the moment across the different levels of organization and how specific they are or not to particular domains. Bill's also provided some quick word clouds, which have come straight out of the survey as well. So this one is a word cloud around about the different service names. So we can sort of see very common ones there: data, research, stewardship, management, repository, and so on and so forth. And then we've also got another free text field, which is around about the main roles which people will ascribe to their service as well. So we see very familiar terms, so manager, curation, librarian, data, research, stewardship, repository, information, digital, very common terms that we'd expect to see. And then moving away from sort of the main roles, but other roles are sort of associated with the service. And we sort of see things like coordinate, manager, scientist, none. So obviously some people are just saying there's no other roles, which in itself is interesting. Privacy and infrastructure. I think kind of one slight area of concern for us at the moment is that we seem to have a very much a dominance in responses from Europe. So we would really love it if you could help us to share the link far and wide to help us reach beyond Europe and reach out especially towards South America, Asia, and Africa. So if anybody could share the links, that'd be fantastic. So that's me and our present update, and I'm going to hand over now to Jukka, and I'm going to stop sharing so he can share his slides. Are you ready to share now, Jukka?
Yes, thank you. I will share my screen. I opened the same slide. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, my name is Jukka Rantasaari. I'm head of library services in the University of Turku, Finland. I will give a short report on the work of the Research Landscape group. Our group is one of the subgroups of Task Group 5, which focuses on training of data stewards. We also have an ambition to work on the other subgroups and would welcome new contributors to our task group. The focus of our landscape subgroup is on charting the research landscape of the research data management skills needed by data stewards and researchers. We have collected and analyzed sources consisting of research papers, reviews, reports, training materials, presentations, web pages, etc. Based on these sources, we now are in the process of writing a report of the identified skills gaps of data stewards and researchers. Hence, the upcoming report will inform, first, what are the data stewards and researchers' skills gaps in RDM? Second, what kind of training is needed to bridge these gaps? Third, what are the existing training resources? And fourth, what are the gaps in existing training resources? Based on the literature that we have collected and analyzed, our objective is to write a literature review. The format of the review can be a report or an article. We have not yet decided the final format. The preliminary structure for the review is made of 3 sections. Section 1 will frame the challenges in professionalizing data stewardship and poses the research questions. Section 2 will describe the methodology we use to collect and analyze the text corpus. Section 3 presents the identified gaps in data stewards and researcher skills and in current training materials. The present working title of the report is "What gaps in training do data stewards face when trying to support the needs of researchers?" And the research questions we can see here, they are illustrated in the slide. The anticipated completion time for this report will be during the spring of 2022. Next, I will shortly go through how we have proceeded so far and where are we now. So first I will open the Soter library where we began the work. We collected sources in this library, and the number of the sources we collected was 257 items categorized in folders. We can see them on the left hand here. And we also categorized them with colored tags based on disciplines and our research questions. The next phase after collecting the sources here in the Soter library was to familiarize with the sources and add the relevant ones to the matrix. I open then the matrix. In this matrix that will soon open, Yeah. Here, in this matrix, we continued familiarizing the sources and provided them with a metadata, brief overview of the contents. Our comments: is the source focusing on data stewards or researchers, RDM needs and tools? What kind of gaps the source has identified? What kind of recommendations the authors of the sources are giving, and what kind of challenges the authors have recognized. After categorizing the sources in matrix, we moved the relevant text excerpts of the sources to the report platform. In bullet point format, I will show the present phase of our report platform. As told, the sources are still mostly behind the bullets here. Yeah, okay. It's still loading, I think, the page. Yeah. Here we see the preliminary contents of our report. From the report platform, when we have collected the relevant text excerpts here on the report platform, each of us writers, and there are 3 of us at the moment, we have probably, each of us have our own styles, how to begin to synthesize and write the texts, which are now behind the bullet points. For example, I have started with chapter 3.1.4, which is gaps in researcher skills. With moving the bullet points to in vivo, I can show my in vivo display here. In vivo, I have coded the text excerpts behind bullet points according to disciplines, after which I have written the first draft version in Word. Yeah. Now I will go back to the report platform. And when we have written the our parts of the report, we return the texts here in the report platform. In fact, here we can see the first draft text so far. One of our writers, Lona, already has written the first version of this chapter 3.1.2, gaps in this data stewards skills. And her text is already open for comments here. Yeah. Now, what we would like and what we would ask you to do after the lesson, if it suits you, is to go to our Padlet board and give us some tips for fresh information with links to sources to find more answers to our research questions. I can show the Padlet, the looks of our Padlet board here. Here are the research questions. First, gaps in existing training materials for data stewards. Second, what kind of skills gaps data stewards have. Third, what kind of skills gaps researchers have. And fourth, other gaps for hindering researchers' sound RDM practices. So please just click the plus button and add information of the possible hints of fresh sources, so we can add them to our matrix and use them as our sources when we write the report. As we could saw in Southern Library and in Matrix, we already have quite a lot of resources. We picked when we had 250 or something sources originally in Southern Library. We chose 157 or something in Matrix and continue with them. But of course, new materials, new sources, new studies, these are all the time they are publishing, and we may miss some very relevant sources. So please, if you know, please add here on the platform. And what we also wish that we would have some new writers. So please join us to write the landscape reports. If you are interested, please contact Jana or me. So that was my part. I will stop sharing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jukka. So I'll just start a screen share again and handing over to Christina to lead us.
Hi, everyone. So for this next activity, what we want to do is get your feedback, both on what you have just heard and also on, kind of overall where this interest group is, and what you think about what it is we're doing and where we should be going. As you heard Graham mention at the beginning, our hope is that we can gather some information from you so that we can prepare to have a follow-on meeting early next year to really start not only celebrating these deliverables and reports you've been hearing about, but also to plan next steps. And so the first thing we would like to do is ask everyone to click the link that was just dropped into the chat to go to our first virtual board. And this is an anonymous board. So what you will do is you can kind of create your own virtual stickies by just adding in your thoughts next to the plus sign and then hitting enter or return on your keyboard to save it to the board. But what we would like to do is to take quickly 60 seconds just to start, because we'd like your feedback on what of everything you've been hearing about this interest group, what it is that you like so far. And so right now, if you can just focus on kind of the positive aspects, what you find exciting about the direction of our work, and kind of add that to the first column on the screen. So you'll have to click that link in the chat. That'll take you to a screen with 3 columns, green, red, and yellow. And we are going to start in that first column on the left that has a plus sign on it. And again, we're just going to do this for 60 seconds. And I'm going to be quiet so everyone can focus. And if you're not a native English speaker, by all means, feel free to add your comments in another language. We can always translate these later as well. Just 20 more seconds. Again, this is thinking about the direction of our interest group overall and our focus on professionalizing data stewardship. What is it that you like about what you've heard so far? And you can keep adding your ideas to that first column, but I'd like to focus our direction on the second column right now. Given everything you've heard, recognizing that right now we're kind of wrapping up our first set of task group deliverables, we'd like to hear your thoughts on what any concerns may be or challenges that you think we're facing right now, issues that we should be thinking about as an interest group about this work. And so if you could put your attention on that second column and share your thoughts, again, 60 seconds. And again, language other than English is welcome. There are some wonderful ideas being put in here, and we might have some time for discussion as well. Yeah, 20 more seconds. Okay, now I would like to ask everyone, and again, for those of you who haven't yet joined, you can click the link in the chat. But right now we want to move to kind of our third column here on our virtual whiteboard, which is to help us just understand what questions are open for you as you've heard about the work that our interest group is currently working on, recognizing that we're going to come together here early next year to plan next steps. What research opportunities or kind of just interest group opportunities do you see on the horizon for us? Or what open questions might you have about that haven't been answered or that won't be answered by the reports you've just heard about? If you can kind of share those ideas, again, with respect to professionalizing data stewardship and research data stewardship. This is the third column you see here on the screen. It should be yellow. If you can go ahead and take 60 seconds to add your thoughts on future research opportunities and open questions that we still need to explore.
Christine, it's also possible to add your own comments to other entries, isn't it?
It absolutely is. So if you see an idea on there that you would like to annotate, you're welcome to click the idea. And if you click on that idea, you can add comments. When you click on an idea, you can also give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And so if you want to just +1 something you see, you can click on it to give it a thumbs up. And again, for those who have just joined, if you want to contribute something in a language other than English, that is perfectly okay. Okay, so we have a lot of ideas here. And I'm going to ask that my fellow co-chairs take a moment to kind of look through this and see if there are items on here that you would like to open up to the floor for discussion while we go through the next activity. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But what we're going to do next, as our co-chairs kind of scroll through this and take a look, is shift to another virtual whiteboard. And this actually was a link I shared previously in the session. But what we wanted to do was also get your feedback specific to the work of the task groups that you've heard presented today. And so we have a single board here, which is a second link on the slide. And I was going to say, it should end in that BDC. Thank you for just posting that in the chat. So if you go to this second group map, what you will see here are kind of 4 areas for the outputs that you've heard about and kind of these ongoing efforts in our different task groups. In the top left, you will see a space to add any thoughts, questions, comments you have around the business case for Data Steward. In the top right, you will see the space to reflect on the terminology effort. In the bottom left, you will see a space for us to reflect on the staffing model work and survey. And then in the right, the data stewardship training landscape research and the report that's being put together. So we've tried to add in questions that have been shared in the chat so far, but let's go ahead and take 60 seconds and start in that top left quadrant and just share any comments or feedback, questions you have with respect to the business case for Data Steward. So this again is task group 1. And this is the presentation that Deborah shared. And as these questions are coming in, Deborah, feel free to address any, and come off mute if there's any quick questions that you think you might be able to answer on this call. I see there's a question on here about when the report for the business case is expected to be completed.
Yeah, so I also saw in the previous board that some of you comment on the synergies between the organizational models and the business case. And so the idea is for us to plan an output for early 2022, and perhaps we could discuss a little more how those two different efforts can be brought together into a single output or something that can be more directly related one to the other. Would you like to comment, Graham?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we get from the survey. And I sort of showed in the slides that those potential groupings we might see. And what I'm hoping we might see is that if those groupings do exist and we sort of drill down to the information from those groupings, that we'll see sort of commonalities which say, yes, you can bring these together. But also I would say that we might see different levels of maturity and therefore kind of where they are with the development of their own business cases. And I think the work of the business case tailored to those particular groups might actually kind of help people along their sort of development and maturity over time.
So we have a couple more minutes here in the top left. Are there any other questions or comments that you two would like to address right now, or do you want us to move to the next one? So again, just focused on that business case piece. Okay, hearing none, let's shift our focus to that data steward terminology. Again, if you have, I see people have been kind of adding comments as we've been going, but if you have any comments, feedback, questions that you'd like to share or discuss, please go ahead and put those in the top right of that virtual whiteboard. It is kind of colored orange. And I'm gonna say, Romain, if you want to reflect on any of these, feel free. Everyone should see there is a thumbs up or thumbs down if you want to add a +1. I agree, you're welcome to.
I've seen that CASRAY and Perforce Skills terminology are cited as well as DAMA1. We will use all existing definitions when existing. So the only thing that we will have to do is to choose when several definitions are existing. And we could have several definitions depending on the context. So it's why in each group we suggest to propose categories to identify the context of the world. The world. That's a proposal of methodology. After, if others want to process in different ways, they can. But we try to identify terms, new terms that are used in specific contexts for data stewardship.
Thank you, that is very helpful. And thank you to those of you who have been adding links to other terminology sets. I'll note, everyone sees them there, there's the link to the FAIR data stewardship skills. So that is really helpful. If others have other things they'd like to add and comment, please by all means share them here as well. So with that, let's shift our attention to the bottom left of our virtual whiteboard. So the data stewardship staffing models work. And so again, this is thinking about those business models that had been presented, and this is the survey. And so if anyone has any questions, comments, feedback, things that they would like to reflect on or discuss, please go ahead and take a couple of moments to add those here. We can kind of discuss those as we go. Again, this is the bottom left of a virtual whiteboard.
I'm just liking all the love you're all showing for our model plots. That's great to see. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about survey distribution or anything else they need there? I guess I have one I should put in there. I can just say it, but do you happen to have any sample language, Graham, that can be shared? Where would people find, like, is there a sample email or a sample Twitter, language that could be used to share the survey?
Yeah, so there is a tweet that's been doing the rounds. I'll find that shortly and I'll post that so people can pick that up and hopefully retweet. So yeah, if you can help us to reach out far and wide, and certainly south of Europe would be brilliant. So give me 2 seconds, I'll get that tweet up.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, there has hopefully people have seen the survey through some of the lists that we sent it to as well. But we are aware that obviously there are many dozens of lists that this kind of thing can go to. If it would be useful, we do have some kind of sample email text as well, so we can drop that into the notes if people wanted to email it out, internally to their organisation or further afield. Then obviously we support that as well.
So I've just posted the link to the main tweet. So if you could pick that up and retweet on your channels, that'd be absolutely amazing. Thank you very much.
I can see there's a question there. Is there a list of where it has been sent? Yeah, we do have a document we've been updating with the lists it's been sent to. So we will. I think we're okay to share the details out. That aren't we, Graham? So
yeah.
We'll pop that in the notes as well.
And there's another question in here about that connection back to business models, but I think kind of you're already describing where that can go next. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you to Deborah for taking time to kind of go through the survey before we sort of released it, just to make sure that the questions were sort of useful from the business models task group as well. So we're already sort of started to think about kind of the crossovers between groups. But beyond that, at the moment, I think there's a particular question with regards to show savings or return on investments from implementing these staffing models. That's not specifically looked at in this survey. This survey really is just getting a landscape view of what's out there and approaches that people are taking, and what has been successful or not so successful in getting communities to engage with their data stewardship provisions. So there is, we sort of started off of saying, okay, can we do a business canvas survey, I think it's called. It's not my expertise, apologies if I've got the term wrong, but we haven't done that yet. I think that might be one avenue we could explore in the new year, where we could take particular exemplars, and then we can actually do real sort of in-depth analysis of what they do and how they're structured, as well as kind of more general sort of models around particular groups. Okay. So somebody sort of posted, is this an environmental scan of models? To an extent, yes, I would say so, because we are trying to sort of look at various different angles and trying to sort of populate, like those two axes, for example, I showed earlier on, of where people are and sort of where their services are on that sort of plot, kind of as an idea of these are two axes to kind of give you an idea of the landscape. And then within that, then we're sort of trying to ask questions which will help us give the depth of what's going on as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And so with that, let's transition to the fourth task group, which is actually our fifth task group. Sorry, I shouldn't use the number there. But to talk about the training landscape research. And so again, this is the bottom right quadrant of our virtual whiteboard. And again, I know people have been kind of commenting and upvoting some questions and comments in here, but if you haven't yet added your thoughts, please do. Any open questions or comments, please try to keep the additional resources on the Padlet, because I know that would be very useful, but I want to open the floor up to discussion. Hugo, do you see anything on there you'd like to reflect on?
Yes, there's the question about the matrix and Zotero links lists, that they look really useful. Thank you. The link to the matrix, that is public. I think, Jana, could you share the link through chat, or at least we can add the links to the link to the matrix to the notes page. But you have to sign up to the Zotero, and you can do it by going to the Zotero library. There's a link through which you can sign up, and then you will get into our library. If you have any problems, just send us email and we will connect you to the library. So matrix is open, but in Zotero you have to sign up. And of course, yes, we can make the third question here. Can you make the resource dataset available in Zenodo? Yes, we can do that, definitely. Not quite yet, but a little bit later, yes. What else? Then there is already answer to this. Is there clear or emerging data stewardship body of knowledge? Thank you for the answer. There is one in first fair. And then there's, will you include an index or current data stewardship training options? We will collect that information too, and yes, because we need to get that information. What kind of trainings there are, existing trainings there are, so that we will find out the gaps. So some kind of index will become, but that's not quite yet either. During the springtime, yes. So did I answer to all the questions? I think I did.
I think so. Thank you so much. And
yeah,
so
thank you.
I was going to say thank you to everyone for being so open with your feedback and for sharing so much. I think now actually we can transition back over to the other virtual whiteboard and open that up for discussion as well. And so let me get that link. And this is really a moment for the co-chair to reflect on what you see here. And if there's just kind of an open floor for discussion, and I would say as well to welcome those of you, if anybody on this call wants to come off of mute and discuss anything in particular. We kind of now have about 20 minutes for open discussion. Is there anything in particular we'd like to focus on first? And if we're not sure, we can go through a really quick voting process to just upvote. And I would probably have us focus on the concerns and challenges and questions and research opportunities. Okay. So if you haven't had a chance yet, if you go into this whiteboard, you're welcome to now upvote or downvote topics you want to discuss. I'm gonna make sure we have all this in your chat window. So we're back on this board. If people haven't seen it in the chat, we can add links to the resources we've been discussing on the interest group website. Okay, I've just reordered those lists so we can kind of see what has been upvoted, and this is now an open for discussion. So question to the co-chair, would you like to kind of talk through these that have been upvoted to start? Let's focus first on, you know, you want to reflect on the things that folks like. I see two things have kind of gotten a lot of attention on there. This network of data stewards and supporting communication, especially given the breadth of the data stewardship profession. Any comments, observations you'd like to share?
I suppose my question is, we have this sort of network through kind of the interest group that's sort of formed. Is this enough to kind of meet the needs? You know, or you know, do people feel that it's good enough to have the Slack community for people to sort of come and engage with it, or is there more that's wanted by the community to kind of help keep that networking going?
I really like that question. I know in other working groups and in interest groups, sometimes if you miss the invitation to the Slack, it feels like you only get the alert pre-plenary of here's what's going on and your panel has been accepted. And so, yeah, I'm curious if others are finding the Slack to be an easy way to engage.
I think it's also worthwhile just thinking about the Slack tool itself and how it fits into the wider landscape of communication, in that Slack doesn't work for everybody. And I think it's worthwhile noting that certainly I know the models task group and possibly one or two of the other task groups, we have regular Zoom calls as well, which everybody's welcome to come and join. And I think we can certainly share links around or get in touch for the invites for the Zoom links. That has to be kind of a key component of keeping the communication channels going, and then using Slack to kind of back that up with keeping the momentum going between different weeks or months as the task groups move forward. And I think that sort of answers possibly one of the questions and the concern or challenges, but which is how to keep momentum going.
Well, and this perhaps is a question for Christine Kirkpatrick, but understanding kind of where a working group structure may be of use to us as we look forward versus the interest group structure we're in right now. And so I look forward to kind of hearing more about that in particular.
Sure. Would you like me to comment now or wait?
Feel free if you'd like. Open discussion.
Oh, okay, sure. So I think, the interest group that we have, it's how you gather people in a way that remains persistent around a certain interest area. So I think that's well understood. Working groups are where you want to form specific outputs, and they usually have a limit of about a year or 18 months or 2 years of work, but the idea is that they come and go. And it's really to recognize that some additional activity is happening. And also I think it's to help tag where liaisons in the secretariat want to track and see what the outcomes are. And then of course there's the new communities of practice designation, which I admit I'm a bit fuzzy on, not because it's a fuzzy idea, but because I'm not completely up to speed. I believe we only have one so far, but that might be another place where this group evolves into having a community of practice as well. So I hope that helps a bit.
It does, thank you. One of the things that's been remarkable to me is how much effort and how many outputs have been created, even though this is in that interest group structure. And so thinking about that in this context of how to stay motivated, I think is as helpful because we don't currently have timelines and deliverables, et cetera, and that kind of project structure for many of these. There's also, I'll just footnote something that came up in the chat. We've had people come and go. And so right now we do have some opportunities for people who want to step in and serve, especially if they're individuals, who are interested in the training aspects, who want to help co-chair as well. We always have this room for kind of additional voices to take a leadership role in both the task groups and as co-chairs.
Well, and I would encourage too, the different task groups, as you think you have some kind of RDA output that you're ready to publish, even though you're not a working group, I think it's fine that they come out of interest groups. I think that there are some that look ready for that designation. And I'd be happy to work with you and or your next liaison to hand off on that. Because I think that, like you said, that could keep the excitement going and maybe draw in new co-chairs for some of those task areas.
So there was a discussion that came up in the co-chairs a couple of months ago about the possibility of trying to draw together task groups 1, 2, and 3 for a working group. We liked kind of the time-bound nature of a working group, but we felt that at the time that it wasn't quite right for those 3 task groups to be formulated around a formal working group. So that's why we sort of came up with this this roadmap to lead into the new year and what we call the next phase of the interest group. It'd be interesting to see what people's thoughts are about that roadmap as well, whether people think that's a feasible approach. Maybe people want to say, oh, it's too soon, maybe need another month or so, or if we think that's a good way to kind of reinvigorate some of the aspects of the interest group and to keep momentum going.
I am updating our whiteboard so we have a place to capture those ideas. There we go.
Well, and I'll say something, and perhaps then other members will speak up, but I think that's a wonderful idea. One nice thing is that you already have a substantial amount of work covered, and so the working group would start ahead of the game, knowing that it could definitely reach its aims because of what you'd already developed. And also focusing into fewer tasks would save some of the time of needing to co-chair the different tasks, and that energy could be redirected to some of the recommendations to publish. So that makes complete sense. I mean, you're talking about the business case terminology and data stewardship models. At least 1 and 3 really belong together, and I trust you all if you think it's 1, 2, and 3.
So with that, if I can ask those who are on the call, if you have specific ideas, to just note it. Hopefully your screen refreshed and you see a 4th column specific to the roadmap and our approach that we've been discussing here about coming back together early next year to discuss kind of where we're at that point with all of these reports in hand and kind of planning those next steps. So if you have a moment, please just drop your ideas. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you have questions or concerns in that 4th column? It's like a really quick poll. And while everyone's adding their ideas there, and I do have a quick question for my fellow co-chairs. There's, I guess the most upvoted opportunity here / question is really one about thinking, general stewardship versus domain specific stewardship. I also would add to that almost kind of research data stewardship versus other types of data stewardship. You know, has anyone thought about that? And has any of the task groups so far grappled with that question of how to frame data stewardship? Is it research? Is it domain? Is it bigger? What's the approach you've taken so far?
I think the first two questions of the survey help on this. One is, you know, okay, what organizational level are you? You know, are you kind of the project, or are you departmental, national, or pan-national, or global? That's one aspect. The other one is then looking at kind of that degree of how generic or specific you are in terms of your domains. And I think hopefully by bringing those two axes together, you know, we can sort of see where people fit. And I think we can then start to see those clusters and answer questions around, you know, the domain specific stewardship versus the general stewardship, and see where there are definitely commonalities and where there are going to be differences as well. And I think to some extent how that then feeds through to things like the training requirements as well, I think that's going to be interesting to see.
Do any of the other task group leads want to comment on that?
No, just one thought about that. The difficulty is to not dilute the efforts, because we know that the disponibility of people is not so big, and sometimes I feel that we have the eyes bigger than the stomach. I don't know if this expression exists in English, but in French that means that we must reach reachable goal and fix them. So it's the reason why I was not for a working group, instead an interest group in PDS work. I think that we need to build stronger links with existing groups for our own needs. That's my two cents.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I mean, if I can just jump in quickly. So from models group 3, thinking about the issue of domain specific stewardship and general stewardship, this is something that I come across. So I work in a university library, and the point made before about the difference between research data and other kinds of data stewardship, that is very valid. There's lots of colleagues who I work with regularly who wouldn't regard themselves as in any way data stewards because of the nature of their work, and actually there's a bigger crossover than I think they realise. And I think part of the work that we're doing across these groups is going to be able to illustrate to people in those roles that they have, a kind of a role to fill with us and a place in this conversation. And this to me feels a little bit like the early days of research data management, a decade, 2 decades ago. We started to move towards, something which actually describes this community. So the thing that was mentioned before about the communities of practice within the RDA, I've not looked into that properly yet, but I think that's a really interesting option that we should explore for these groups, because this is not something that can be finished in a year or 18 months. This is actually a rolling thing that is going to be, there'll be value that we can discern and add, for quite some time to come from now. So that's just my perspective as I guess as someone in the role that I'm in right now.
It's also like to say, take Bill and myself as examples of 2 different approaches there. I mean, I come from a domain specific repository, and Bill, you're more of an institutional one, and yeah. I think the conversations which we were able to have inside the task group in particular are ensuring that we are sort of getting that broader spectrum and seeing the commonalities and differences. And I think to some extent that's really been sort of instrumental in the survey and how it's being couched, and the terminology that's used and the breadth that it is gone for as well. But yeah, hopefully we haven't bitten off more than we can chew. I've just seen somebody posted the comment following on from Roman.
Thank you. And we now have just a few minutes of time before we hand things over to Christine, and just to open up the floor for those of you who have been listening and interacting with us. Is there anyone who would like to come off mute and share any ideas, feedback verbally? You're welcome to unmute yourself at this time.
Laura has got a hand up.
Go ahead,
Can't
Laura.
hear you at the moment, though. You're off mute, but we can't hear you. Or if you want to put a comment in the chat window, that would be great. Thanks, Laura. I can read it out as it comes in. So just while Laura's sort of typing in, yeah, just a reminder that please do keep in touch with the group. We have a web page on the RDA website, which has got details of what we're doing and links to our Slack channel, hopefully. And please do get in touch via email as well. So there's a variety of ways to kind of keep in touch. And if you want to join any of the task group meetings as well, then I'm sure we'd be happy to sort of share the invites around. So Laura's types, others have raised this already, but to be efficient, it's worth keeping in touch with the education and training interest group as well on the training activities. Thank you, Laura. And also the Terms for Fair Skills working group for the terminology work. I think I've seen the Terms for Fair Skills mentioned a few times in the feedback. And Roman's given a nice +1 for that as well. And Laura's got a question. What's the difference between that one and the proposed one here? Is that with regards to the Terms for Fair Skills working group, Laura? Roman, do you want to come in with that one?
Yeah, perhaps. I know that the Terms for Fair Skills is limited to a certain perimeter, and in RDA we have larger perimeter. I think that the scope of our work is not to reinvent the term for fair skills. That is great, but just try to find where terms are missing and how we can supply that. There are other good work to use, like CASRAI, for instance, and others in European programs like Life, like Fair Plus or Fair Sharing. You have lots of things to use to do that. But the first thing is to list for each purpose, each topic, the terms that are used, on how they are used, in which context, and after to see if there are existing definitions. So we will never rewrite good definitions in an existing tool. But I know that we will have to make more links with all these démarches. But I need help. So if you are a candidate to help me, you're welcome.
It sounds like it's would be a good thing to link up with there, Laura, because so you've posted the link to the terms of fair skills. You mentioned that it's focused on skills for fair data stewardship and are keen to collaborate. And it's not limited to the RDA or any given EU project, I think. Those are your comments.
Wonderful. Is there any other comments or discussion? I see, oh, Bridget had a comment in the chat. This is regarding the survey.
Yeah, so Bridget's raised the concern. I think she may have given it to us previously about the term data stewardship itself. And I think this probably touches on what you were saying, Bill, that people may refrain from responding because they don't see themselves linking up with that term. So how does it apply to them? How do we bring those people into it? Yeah, I think it's one of these things that which term do you go for? You might kind of miss out one particular community. A fair point kind of Bridget's also said we don't actually give a definition on the start page of the survey. Yeah, maybe we could have done that. But there's a lot of information on the front page of it.
Yeah,
hindsight's a great thing. Yeah, I think the term data stewardship, yeah, it does probably have more meaning to some people than others, and that might hamper some of our reach for the survey. But hopefully, as we kind of retweet and send out more reminders next week to encourage people to kind of continue completing, we can encourage other people beyond our respondents so far with different terminology to kind of draw them in. That might be a good suggestion.
I'm just going to note from a personal perspective, I know one of the reasons I joined this interest group was to try to help clarify in this community where the overlaps are between data stewardship and data management, and data stewardship and data ethics and data privacy. And there's so much kind of overlapping expertise that I feel like sometimes people, depending on their perspective, may use those terms interchangeably, and other times they mean them to be more or less inclusive. And so clarifying that, I think, would be something to be really useful.
Yeah, I'm just jumping down on the slides. There was one of the other task groups, which is task group 4, the job profiles. And I think that's sort of what you're touching on there, isn't it, Christina?
Well, not so much job profiles. From where I'm thinking about this is almost in terms of terminology and the body of knowledge. If we find out that when we're talking about what data stewardship is, we're defining it in terms that are identical to data management, then what is truly different? Or do we find out that the realm of data stewardship is actually much broader in that it does include data ethics and data governance and all of these other domains? I don't think right now there's a really good, in my mind, a network diagram of how these all fit together. But personas, I think of personas as that task group that you were just sharing, and I know someone noted that on the board as well. So for the individual who shared that, know that that's an opportunity. And if this is something you would like to kind of run with and help organize, please reach out, because we would be happy to include you in those discussions as we work towards January and February. So I believe we're ready for the next part of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much for leading us there, Christina. So it's my pleasure now to invite Christine Kirkpatrick, our tab liaison, who will be stepping down very shortly, to give us a retrospective on her time with our group and what she's heard today. So Christine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Graham. And it has been my extreme honor to be the TAB liaison. My term of 3 years is ending and I didn't stand for re-election. So it's not like I don't mean to imply I'm leaving because I'm not enjoying this. In fact, I plan to remain a member. I've really enjoyed this 90 minutes that we had together, starting with Deborah talking about making the case for having data stewards at all. Romaine, who talked to us a bit about terminology. Graham, who talked to us about a bit about staffing models and how models for data stewardship can make the case, especially in organizations that don't call those positions that yet, or don't have positions that are solely that. We heard from Yuka about the research landscape of training, and then a bit more from Christina about training. Throughout, I think a few themes emerged. One, that this is an interest group that is definitely interested in community input and that wants to reach out from beyond the EU, that really wants a global interest group who's giving a broad perspective on how this should be shaped. And that it's really up to all of you to shape how this works from here on out. This group really wants to support the formation of data stewards and this community that will work together to keep it vibrant. Many of the people who work in these roles do it alone in an organization. And so this is a way for you to be part of a larger group and to give each other feedback. I would say everyone can agree that they have done a tremendous job at harnessing the virtual collaboration tools that are available, and that they have done everything they can to give everyone a voice and have different ways for you to provide that input. You know, many interest groups, I'd say all interest groups, gain a lot from being part of the Research Data Alliance. There's a tremendous membership, and you put your interest group out there and others come to listen. But some interest groups are very special, and this is one. This is an interest group that attracts people to RDA. And so I would really like to congratulate everything that you've done in this short amount of time, because you have really added to the richness of RDA. As I said before, I think you're poised to really publish some of your recommendations and to have those not only be publications, but things that are referenced and influence the formation of these positions inside domains and in to add to the richness and the conversation going on in other settings, people who might not come to RDA. I think this group has a tremendous opportunity for impact and will shape the formation of this field. And so again, thank you. It's been my honor to be your TAB liaison. I'm trying to line up a TAB liaison who will take a special interest in you as well. And you can count on me to be an active member. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Christine. I think we're just drawing to an end now. I will just get my screen shared one last time. So yes, I just want to say some thanks first of all. So thank you for RDA for supporting the work of our interest group and sort of providing guidance for us, and particularly to Christine for being such a supportive TAB liaison for us. And yeah, we look forward to your continued involvement with us. So it's great to hear. And thanks to everybody who's been able to input to the interest group to date. We've sort of really appreciated all of your inputs, and it's really helped us to move to where we are today, which is great to see just in a couple of years' time, how much we've been able to achieve. And thank you for joining us today. So if you would like to kind of continue your involvement with what we're doing and keep up to date, that'd be really good to see. There's links in the collaborative notes and on the RDA pages for the interest group. Please come and join our Slack community for regular communications and to find out what's going on and to chip in with your thoughts, and also via email as well to the various co-chairs. So our next steps, as we said before, is that our task groups will continue working away with the hopeful aim of the webinar in early 2022 to help shape the next phase of our interest group. And then that will hopefully lead us up towards the RDA plenary number 19. I think it's the 8th to the 11th of November, apparently. So thank you very much, one and all, and enjoy the rest of RDA.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Angus, I think we're okay to stop sharing now. Sorry, stop the recording.